Your Excellency, are you ready for a new world order?
I think, Becky, the main problem is if you think of the technology is 21st century, 22nd century technology, international relations. But I think the frame of thinking is still 19th century. I think this is one of the problems that we have in the international system.
I think where we are now, and this gets to your question, Becky, of a new world order, is it can go in two directions with the war in Ukraine now being a decisive element. Either the jungle is back, as the historian Bob Kagan talks, and that we can go into a darker era, or...
شنو هو؟ السلام عليكم الاخوه والاخوات، سلام الله عليكم اجمعين، نتمنى تكونوا بخير وعلى خير يا رب العالمين اينما كنتم. هيهات انتم هيهات، صراحه اللي يدخل يدير لايك وبارطاج لهذا الفيديو، هذا فيديو كيهم كاع العرب المسلمين وغير المسلمين اللي كيامنوا بالمؤامره ولا ما كيامنوش بها. فيديو عنده 27 دقيقه غير موجود باللغه العربيه، ترجمته خد لي بزاف ديال الوقت، ما كنطلب منكم والو، فقط الاشتراك، البارطاج عفوا، واللايكات والتعليقات الى اخره. فيديو يعني خاد وقت بزاف. الموضوع ديال الفيديو ماشي قناه ديال الخفايا ولا ديال المجهول او ديال المؤامرات او ديال الغريب وما نعرف شنو داكشي ديال، لا لا لا، هذه قناه تابعه القمه العالميه للحكومات، فيها العرب وغير العرب وفيها بزاف د الحوايج اللي خصكم تعرفوها. الغريب في الامر ان الفيديو يعني طويل بزاف، السميه ديالو العنوان ديالو هل نحن مستعدون للنظام العالمي الجديد؟ انا ملي شفتو قلت ضروري هذا الفيديو خصو يترجم وخصنا نخدموا عليه باش الاخوان كلهم يشوفوه. عندنا بعدا كاين قبل ما نبدا اي حاجه خصكم تعرفوا ان كاينين 4 ديال الضيوف، وعاده باش المذيعه بيكي اندرسون هي خدامه في اذاعه CNN. كتصادف انور محمد اللي هو الوزير السابق للعلاقات الخارجيه ديال دوله الامارات، وحاليا هو لاسيستنتي، يعني هو بحال كنقولوا حنا الدرع اليمين ديال الاتحاد الاوروبي، يعني كيمثلها. ايضا معنا فريدريك كامب اللي هو الرئيس ديال المنظمه ولا الفونداسيون ديال الاتلانتيك، هي عندها علاقه شامله العلوم ديال العالم كله، العولمه وما يخصها. زائد على هادشي كامل عندنا واحد السيده اللي هي بيبا مارغرين، كانت بحال كنقولوا حنايا ماشي الدرع اليمين ديال الرئيس السابق بوش، وانما كانت يعني كتنوب عليه في بعض المسائل، وزيدون داخله في اللجنه الاقتصاديه الوطنيه ديال الاتحاد ديال الولايات المتحده. إلا جينا نشوفوا ان أمومة الموضوع ماشي فقط غير اشنو كيتسنانا واش حنا مستعدين للنظام العالمي الجديد، انما كيتكلموا حتى واحد البروجي، هو مشروع ديال العام اللي فات ديال 2021 وداخله فيه الامارات وقطر وبزاف ديال الدول العربيه اللي هما كيقولوا مستعدين وكيقراو ما نعرف شنو على خلق او تركيبه او صناعه كيش غنقولها لكم، حواء يعني مشروع حواء، انسان آلي، انسان بشري او انسان شبه مركب، وهادشي راه تكلمنا عليه ماشي مره ماشي جوج، يعني هذا هو الهدف. فهاد القضيه هذه يعني حاليا مشروع اللي هو باقي ما خرجش ولكن خدامين فيه، شيء اللي هو باش يتحكموا او لا ينوبوا الانسان. هما كيقولوا غادي نوبوا على الانسان، ولكن هي الصراحه ما عندها علاقه بالنيابه، انما التحكم عن بعد او عن قرب. فوق هادشي كامل مارغريت بيبا مارغريت، هاد السيده هذه كتكلم على المال، يعني كل واحد فاش كان كيتكلم، ولكن هي كتكلم على المال، بغات تتكلم على نظام عالمي اللي كيتكلم على عمله موحده، على خاص يكون دستور ديال هاد الاموال، دستور ديال هاد العالم الديجيتال، الدستور ديال الفلوس الديجيتال الى اخره الى اخره. صراحه ما غاديش نزيد نطول عليكم، نخليكم مع الفيديو، فقط نطلب منكم الدعم، الاشتراك، بارطاج، لايكات الى اخره. احبكم في الله، واللي عجبو خليه التعليق ديالو. نشوفكم ان شاء الله، الله يعاونكم، بسلامه.
Your Excellency, are you ready for a new world order?
I think, Becky, the main problem is if you think of the technology is 21st century, 22nd century technology. What is happening in AI, what is happening everywhere really, that will really transform and is transforming our lives and also transforming international relations. But I think the frame of thinking is still 19th century. I think this is one of the problems that we have in the international system. Where if you look, it's still about nationalism, it's still about state sovereignty. It's still about use of force or non-use of force. And I think this is one of the major issues as we try to bridge really what is mentally, governing international relations with a 19th century mode of thinking, but at the same time with technology fast ahead of us in the curve. That I think will be a major problem.
That's a very interesting perspective. Fred Kemp, your assessment.
So my mentor on issues of world order is Henry Kissinger, so I'll try to channel him, and forgive me, Dr. Kissinger. But his answer would be, what do you mean no new world order? We have not had a world order yet. What we've had is we've had a Western order that was imposed on the world. And so the first world order in modern times, or somewhat modern times, was 4 centuries ago with the Treaty of Westphalia, ending a century of conflict, the 30 Years' War. And it wasn't a great moral thrust, it was just recognizing the world as it was. If you look at what we're trying to create right now, we're, I would say, at an inflection point in history as important as the end of World War I, where we got the effort at world order tragically wrong. We ended up with millions of dead, the Holocaust in World War II. After World War II, we got it more right than wrong with the creation of the International Liberal Order and the United Nations and the Bretton Woods system and the European Coal and Steel Community, NATO, etc. And then the Soviet Union fell, and then the Cold War, we thought it was the end of history, and we thought that everyone could fit into the system that had been created, and it worked for a while, but not everybody came into it. But China grew. China certainly took full advantage of being part of the global system. Russia did not. Russia became more of an outlier. And I think where we are now, and this gets to your question, Becky, of a new world order, is it can go in 2 directions with the war in Ukraine now being a decisive element. Either the jungle is back, as the historian Bob Kagan talks, and that we can go into a darker era, or we could go into an era because of the advances of science, advances of technology. There could be one of the most prosperous, promising, progressive, enlightened, moderate, modern eras that we've ever faced. And I think we're in a moment where that's being decided, and I think the importance of the Ukraine issue is that it's a fulcrum for this, and how the world manages this and comes out of this is going to have far-reaching consequences that go beyond Ukraine.
Thank you. Amal Gargash, then. Let's just start with you. If we are looking at a new world order that is, as Pippa describes it, decentralized, if we are looking at a new world that is not a single power based, as it were, and a world that is layered by these, what feel like very new global issues of climate change, of cybersecurity, as you suggest, of technology and the speed of that, what does that mean for this region? Because the perspective that we discuss world order through, as Fred has rightly pointed out, has been a Western perspective. My sense is that we must stop doing that. So what is the impact on this region?
I think to start with, Becky, the region has to catch up. I mean, the region is really behind various other regions in the world. And I think it's by prioritizing its own politics and prioritizing its own polarizing wars and confrontations. The region really, I think, number one, as the world is becoming multipolar, and I believe it is, and I agree also with the idea that this multipolarity is moving from economic to, from political to economic to what I would call even currency multipolarity as we move forward. I think the region is really going through 2 phases. Number one is witnessing the sort of upper structure changing, but it has to catch up, and it has to catch up by emphasizing, in my opinion, non-political issues. Some of them are global issues, the ones you mentioned, and certainly COVID is a clear test of what we should be concentrating on: food security and cyber capability and climate change and others. But more fundamentally, I think the region lags behind in terms of multi projects of integration, economic integration, etc. I mean, if you just look at the GCC, for example, the GCC has never really been a big success when it comes to political direction. It has had varied views there, but it's been a huge success really in creating what I would call a common market. So I think the region needs to catch up before it actually becomes a major player. Otherwise, it will be very much subservient to this multipolarity that we're talking about.
And I want to come back to you for a sense from you, which I think would be extremely useful for this audience, as to what is going on behind the scenes here. When I say behind the scenes, it's very visible that there is enormous change in this region. Witness the meeting in the Negev Desert, the summit attended by the foreign minister here, His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, 4 Arab foreign ministers meeting in the Negev Desert with the Israelis. I mean, if you told me that that was going to happen 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even a couple of weeks ago, I think I'd have still been surprised by that. So I do want to get, because I think that's very important, we get your perspective as to what is going on behind the scenes. But thank you, Fred. This sense that you, and you certainly see this here, that we are in a pivot with foreign policy to a policy that fundamentally and clearly serves economic needs, geopolitics to geoeconomics, as Dr. Anwar has suggested, I think is certainly an extremely important driver of what is going on today. But your sense, I want to get a sense of where we're at and the impact that this will have on global policy going forward and how this world is run.
The impact of the economics of it all. Well, first of all, let's take a look at what makes up world orders. World orders are that a group of countries across the world agree to a set of rules, and they agree to play by them. The second is there's a balance of power so that no power feels that it can subjugate a neighbor. But then the third part of this is a consensus that everyone accepts this. It's almost too utopian to come about. And so what's emerging right now, which I think is a danger, is a Chinese-centered order and a U.S.-centered order, and that we're breaking down again. And that's not a healthy outcome. It's not the outcome we want. But that gets to the economics, and that's what I wanted to touch on, because the economics are that China, I think in 2016-17, invested $53 billion in the United States. Last year, $1 billion. So there's already a decoupling, there's already a breaking down, and the question is, how does this play out right now? And so I think you're going to see, in an economic sense, you're going to see these two worlds, but it's not going to be that neat. I think you're going to see the evolution of regional organizations, and regional, because it's so hard to create a world order, I think you're going to see regional orders spring up, and then you have links between regional orders, but they will be very much guided by economic interests, social interests, and also security interests. You see things like the Quad, like the Abraham Accords, so ad hoc, not inflexible alliances, and that seems to me what's emerging at the moment.
And it's not about the U.S. versus China. It's about what underpins a world order is always the financial system. I was very privileged. My father was an advisor to Nixon when they came off the gold standard in '71, and so I was brought up with a kind of inside view of how very important the financial structure is to absolutely everything else. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. But also, this new money will be sovereign in nature. Most people think that digital money is crypto and private, but what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The US is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that as well. And the question is, will that new system of digital money and digital accounting accommodate the competing needs of the citizens of all these locations so that every human being has a chance to have a better life? Because that's the only measure of whether a world order really serves. clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. But also, this new money will be sovereign in nature. Most people think that digital money is crypto and private, but what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The US is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that as well. And the question is, will that new system of digital money and digital accounting accommodate the competing needs of the citizens of all these locations so that every human being has a chance to have a better life? Because that's the only measure of whether a world order really serves.
How you believe governments will navigate the new global dynamics to shape a better future, which brings me very neatly.
I want to come back to the whole issue of this issue between democracy and authoritarianism. I think that this sort of binary is, from our perspective, is not the one we see. I think there are so many shades in between, and I think, for example, in COVID, it was really government efficacy that really identified who did well and who didn't do well. But I believe that you do ultimately need, perhaps in the middle between these two, you need something called governance. I think if every democratic attempt in the Arab world has turned ideological or tribal, so I'm not sure that this is really something that we can actually, work out very successfully here. But we do need governance. And governance, of course, includes a lot of components that are there. And I think this is perhaps the middle between the two binaries that you mentioned.
Fred.
Yeah, and Becky, I think I can pick up on Dr. Gargash because I agree with him completely that in a way it's a false narrative. The issue is government effectiveness and whether the people consider the government to be legitimate. Democracy is one way to achieve that. There are other ways to achieve it. And the legitimacy is gained by governments that can deliver the goods, effectiveness to their people, can deliver freedom, which people want, so ensure human rights, ensure freedom, but at the same time ensure order, ensure safety, ensure health care. And I think this new era of technological change going faster all the time, whether it's quantum computing or artificial intelligence or bioengineering, these technologies are